Hi, I'm Tommy Lee, and this is Northern ADV and Touring. Thanks for joining me again today. Some of you might be new to motorcycling, or maybe you've just gotten a bike that's more suitable for longer rides, and now you want to stretch out and explore a little. That's awesome. Well, it just so happens that I'm about to start planning another multi-day trip of my own. So let's do this together, and hopefully it might inspire you to start planning one too, or perhaps you'll just find something useful in this video that you can use towards your planning experience. So this time around, it's not a solo trip. My brother and I, we often ride together. Well, we've decided to take a couple of weeks off work and ride from our part of Canada, which is Northern Ontario, all the way down to Key West, Florida. Now, we've been to Florida a bunch of times, but this will be our first ride down on our bike, so we're really excited about that. For us, it's not as much about the destination as it is about the adventure. And the adventure begins the moment we pull out of our driveways. Between us and Key West, there's a ton of cool places to see and fun roads to ride. So it's going to be an awesome trip. Okay, so let's have a look at Google Maps. Okay, so the shortest distance for us to ride would be right down the I-75, and that would be about 3,000 kilometers, or about 1,900 miles. Well, we're not doing that. On the way down, we'd like to ride through the Smokies. We'd like to hit the Tail of the Dragon, which I rode in September. And generally, we'd like to try to stick to more of the secondary roads and highways. So we'll be well over 2,000 miles each way, maybe 2,500. But like I said, we have 2 weeks, so we have plenty of time for the trip with no pressure to have to ride 500 miles every day, unless we decide we want to do that on the occasional day. But on the way home, we'll come back on a different route to mix it up, and we'll see a few more states. So we have a basic route, but like I said, some days we might want to ride long and others not so much. So we're not going to plan specifics for each day. Also, this ride will be in October. You might ask, why October? Well, a couple of reasons. One, we're Canadian, okay? And it's starting to get cold here in October. So by riding south at that time of the year, we kind of get to extend our summer by a couple of weeks. Two, it's off-season for tourism at that time. So we don't really have to worry about not getting a room in the places that we want to go, and the prices are lower. On the downside, it's starting to get cooler, so we'll have to dress warmer to start out, and then once we get back up north, there's always a chance of snow or freezing rain later on in October. You know, at that time of year, I guess there's a chance of getting into a hurricane when we're down in the Keys. Hopefully we don't have to, but hey, it'll be a new experience. Okay, so back to the map. Since we live near the Michigan border, we ride in Michigan quite a bit. It's a beautiful state with lots to see, but we're anxious to get into the hills. So this time we might choose to blow through Michigan and get closer to some roads that we rarely get to ride. So here's where some tentative planning comes into play. When we leave the first morning, we'll talk about which highways we want to take through Michigan, likely the I-75 to the 129 or the 23. Maybe we'll mix in some secondary roads. But we also want to plan for 2 or 3 possible destinations that night, depending on how far we want to ride. So a shorter day might have us stop in Toledo, while a longer day might take us to Columbus, or if we pushed to an even longer day, that might get us down close to the West Virginia state line. So we'll talk more about that in the early afternoon after we've ridden all morning and we've put some miles behind us. We can see where we're at, we can gauge how we're feeling, we can see what's up ahead on the map, and then we can decide whether to make it a longer day or a shorter day. You don't have to decide that first thing in the morning. Once we've decided where we want to end up that day, I'm going to pull over, I'm going to pull out my phone, and I'm going to get on Priceline, and I'll book a room at that destination. By booking online each day, we're able to maintain our freedom over having something pre-booked before we leave home and then having to either stop before we're ready or having to push on long after we're tired. So by booking online and using Priceline, I'm going to save a few bucks, and I'll greatly increase our odds of finding a hotel that we're both happy with. If you choose to just ride in and not book at all, you might be left in a bad situation if it's late in the day and there's no more vacancy. Okay, you might end up having to backtrack to a town you've already gone through, or ride on to the next town when you're already tired. So that's basically how we roll each day. We're going to ride in the morning and gauge in the early afternoon how we're doing and how far we want to go. It's kind of nice to have those options. All right, moving on. So I'm riding this trip. I'm going to ride a Honda Goldwing, which obviously can carry lots of stuff and is pretty comfortable for riding long days. My bro is going to be on his Honda adventure bike, so he will likely be determining how long we ride each day. His butt's going to get sore a little bit before mine is. And that's cool. So on this trip, we're not going to be camping, so gear and weight is not a real big issue. However, it will be October, so we're going to be bundled up pretty good when we start out and likely shedding layers as we head south. So we have to leave room in our bags for stuff, for gear and clothes that we're not going to be wearing in Florida. So always keep that in mind. Don't pack to the max. Never pack to the max. Always leave room for gear and maybe some souvenirs. Since we're talking about bikes, when I'm traveling, especially on some back highways, some back roads, if I'm on my adventure bike, and on new routes that I haven't taken before, I'm always aware of my fuel level. And whenever I get to the half a tank point, I start to think about where my next fill up's going to be. At half a tank, okay, you still have the option of going back to where you filled up originally or one you might have passed along the way. Once you're past half a tank, you're kind of at the point of no return, so you have to keep going to the next station. So I always think about where my next fill up's going to be. The further you are off the beaten path, the more important that is. Keep that in mind. If you're adventure riding in the backcountry, you might consider bringing a fuel can with you. Where we're going, we're not really going to be in a lot of sparsely populated areas. There should be gas stations, I would expect. And from my last ride, at least every 50 miles or so. Not a big deal. So let's talk about budget. We're going to need gas, we know that. But for us, gas is a bargain in the States. It's a lot more expensive here in Canada. So let's say $20 a fill up. In Canada, it's $30 roughly to fill my bike up. 2 or 3 fill ups a day, so let's say $50 a day for gas, each person. We're going to need to eat. So how much and how often and how expensive is a personal choice. When I ride, I can usually get away with a fast food breakfast, usually, $5 or $6. Many hotels include breakfast. Keep that in mind when you're booking your accommodations. Now, like I say, as you know, I like to ride. So lunch for me is often snacking on a couple of granola bars or stopping quick for, something cheap. Cold drinks during the day can add up, I guess, coffees, depending on where you're riding. I typically spend more on dinner than I will on breakfast and lunch combined. But I'm not exactly a foodie. I'm not all that picky. So all in all, I can budget $40 a day for food, and I'm usually coming in well under that. You might want to budget a lot more. Depends on where you like to eat. Okay, so since I'm riding with my brother, we'll be sharing a room. So I'll budget, $60 a night. We're going to get hotel rooms for likely a lot less than $120 a night, as you just saw in my last graphic from Priceline. So $40 a day for food, $50 a day for gas, $60 a night for a hotel. So $150 a day plus anything else you might want to buy along the way. So I can be very comfortable on $200 per day for my budget, and I'll actually spend a lot less than that. You'll have to figure out what works for you. If I'm traveling solo and staying in hotels, I'm going to have to budget a bit more. But if I'm camping, I'm going to budget quite a bit less. So if you budget, say, $300 a day, you'll have more accommodation options. You'll be able to stay in some nicer places. Budgeting for unforeseen expenses, such as replacing a blown tire or fixing some other bike breakdown, a belt on your Harley, or whatever the case may be, that's up to you. I recommend having a credit card handy for stuff like that. I bring along a card that I normally won't have a balance on, and in worst case scenario, if I have to buy a used bike or buy a plane ticket home or whatever the case may be, I'll be able to do that. So I don't have to stress about thinking about what could happen or what, those kind of things. Okay, moving on. So we've got our budget. We know where we're going. Some might say, all right, planning's done. Let's get on the bike and pull out. That's cool, but let's touch on gear. I personally like to wear armored pants and a jacket with something very light underneath, but I usually want one pair of jeans for when I'm not riding. A couple of shirts, long sleeve, short sleeve, whatever. And for me, I like to try to stick with the artificial fabrics, the rayons and those kind of blends. They tend to wick moisture better if you're riding in hot weather. They're more comfortable, I find. They're more comfortable for me anyway, and they pack a lot better. They don't wrinkle. I pack 5 or 6 pairs of underwear and socks. I don't mind having to stop and do a load of laundry along the way, but if you want to avoid that, just pack accordingly. For a 2-week trip, 14 pairs of socks and underwear is quite a bit to pack, so I might opt for the laundry option along the way. I always bring rain gear. Now, on rain gear, be sure not to pack a real heavy rain suit. It's just going to take up too much space in your bag, and if you're going for a longer trip, space is probably going to be a premium. And like I said before, you don't want to pack to the max. If you have a cheap rain suit that is a heavier one, and you find along the way that you need more room, that's something maybe you could leave behind and risk riding through the rain on the way home. Anyway, I pack a lighter rain suit that takes up less space in my bag. Consider a bathing suit. We're going to Florida. I'm definitely bringing a bathing suit with me. Consider a pair of sneakers or sandals for when you're hanging out, as you might not want to wear your riding boots down to the pool. Okay, I always will bring just a thin pair of sandals. Sneakers if I'm walking around a little town. If I'm walking around Gatlinburg at night, if we're staying there, I like to be a little more comfortable. I don't want to have my riding boots on the whole time, especially after having them on all day. So if you can spare a little bit of room, bring an extra pair of sneakers with you. Maybe a ball hat. I like to wear my ball hats, and if you're heading to a warm place, it's kind of nice to have one if you're going around seeing some sights. Okay, that's about it for clothes. Just keep it light. Don't forget your toiletries, your suntan lotion, and your phone charger. Now, on my bike and on many of your bikes, you probably have a little 12-volt charging spot on your bike, a power point, maybe a couple of those. So don't forget your cords that you're going to need to plug in your camera or your phone. Keep those things charged. Since I'm always filming, I'll always bring my camera equipment and usually my laptop so I can do a little bit of video editing at night. Oh, and maybe a small first aid kit. I just have a little one. It doesn't have to have a whole lot in it. Some bandages, maybe a little bit of gauze, some tape, a pair of scissors, a little bit of disinfectant or alcohol wipes or those kind of things. If you forgot something, as I'm probably forgetting something right here as I'm talking, I'm sure you can find a Walmart or a drugstore, small town hardware store that has this and that. along the way. You don't have to plan for every single thing that might happen. Unless you're really going to be out in the boonies, then you have to just, for safety's sake, you have to make sure that you have everything with you. So all in all, I don't get hung up on the detailed planning. If you are a real detailed oriented person and you have to have everything planned out ahead of time, that's great. Go with that. Okay, you don't need to be, you don't need to have your anxiety overflowing out on the road. You just want to have, for me, I just want to have a rough idea of where I'm going, how long I'm going to be, how much cash I'm going to need, along with some extra cash or credit card. I'm just going to go out there and have a good time. Just don't leave it too late in the day to plan where you're staying that night. If you're camping, you want to be, ideally setting up in the daylight when there's still some light left. It's really no fun to camp in the dark, to set up your camp in the dark. And if you're booking rooms, depends on the time of year. If you're heading to a tourist area and it's in tourist season, you're going to want to have that booked ahead of time. Remember, there's also campgrounds like KOAs that might have camping cabins or camping trailers already set up for you. That's another option. There's couch surfing. If you haven't heard about couch surfing, that's something you can check out online. We're not going to talk about that here. Just have an open mind, but have a fantastic ride. Please comment below with your planning tips and anything else you'd like to share. As always, keep your stick on the ice, keep the rubber side down, and you will have a great day.